Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week, we are sharing our essential steps to help you master your emotions. Now, we all have emotions. They are completely natural and normal. But are your emotions and feelings running your life, creating a sense of overwhelm or negatively impacting your overall health or your relationships? Well, in this teaching, you'll learn how to take back control of your emotions, how to practice healthy and authentic emotional self-responsibility, and how to use your emotions as a force for good in your life. Okay, David, so is it actually possible to control our emotions?
Well, I would say 100% definitely yes. And that's the basis of the Wu Wei Wisdom model. So many of my clients live their life based on their emotions, and I want them to move that over and base it on their mind, on their thinking, on their thoughts, on their beliefs, on their morals, on their principles, whatever you want to call it. And that's one of the difficulties, because we're so tied into our emotions. The mentality, the logic, the thought process has got so many different words and labels. And so you have to, I call it beliefs, what you believe. I think that's an important word for me. But for you, it could be your principles or your values or your morals. So find what that core is for you. And then once you understand that, then you have the power to control your emotions.
So are you saying that we shouldn't be letting our emotions control our life, but we should be allowing our beliefs to control our life? Or dictate our life journey?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I call it the ABC. So the A, the first step, is the situation, the person, if you like, the stimulus, the stimuli, A. B should be what you believe, what you interpret, how you view in your mind, in your thinking. C is the emotion that creates. So A is the situation, the person, the stimulus. B is your view, the way you view that, your interpretation. C is the emotion that view creates. For nearly all of my clients, they do not do A, B, C. They do A, C, B. So the person or the situation, the stimuli. C, the emotion. B, now what they think about the emotion. So instead of acting on the A, they're acting from their emotion. They've got it backwards. They've got it round the wrong way.
Okay, so you're saying that we react and act on to external situations, to people, events, purely from our emotions.
That's right.
And then we make choices purely from our emotions rather than running our judgments through the filter of healthy, authentic values and beliefs.
And logic and reality. Yeah. We're not doing that, Alex. And what we do, we switch those two around. So many of, again, if this is a perfect video, we all go over the teaching. You are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim. So go back to my A, B, C. A, the stimulus. B is the thoughts, the beliefs, the logic. Then C is the emotion. You create the emotion. B creates C, not C creating B. And this fundamental misunderstanding is what we're brought up in. If you look at all the movies, all the love songs, all of the poetry, all of the books, it's all based on emotions. And then we react to emotions. So I'm teaching and sharing with you. There's nothing wrong with emotions. Emotions are wonderful. Emotions are really helpful. We're not trying to eliminate emotions. We're not trying to cut them out. We're not trying to ignore them. We're not trying to make you emotionless. This is what a lot of my clients say. Are you trying to make me void of emotions? No, the opposite. Have as many emotions as you want to, but you create them. And that simple teaching, I believe, and this is why I want to share it with you, is life-changing, completely life-changing for this reason. Because you either now base your life, your decisions about your family, about your partners, about your career, or about the car you drive, the house you live, where you live. You base that on emotion, or you base it on logic, intellect, beliefs. I want you to base it on beliefs, because then you can filter things and see things much more clearly. Because I believe strongly that when you base it on your beliefs, you're much closer to your spirituality. You're much more able to look at things in a balanced way, in a calm way, in a thoughtful way. In Wu Wei, that's what Wu Wei means, that you're coming at it and you're basing your views, your interpretations, your reactions from what you actually believe. What are your principles? What are your values? What are your morals? Where are they grounded in? Much more than going with your emotions. The emotions are all over the place. 1 minute you can be sad and overwhelmed, as you said in the introduction. 1 minute you can be happy. Somebody looks some way. Somebody says something else. Somebody does something. And you're like a kite flying in the wind with no control, nothing. You're just reactive. You're a reactive person. And then people will say things like, well, I'm sensitive. I'm hypersensitive. I'm all of this. No, it's because you're not basing your life on a firm foundation.
And that point about being a highly sensitive person is quite relevant, because I know a lot of our supporters and viewers are very highly sensitive, creative, intuitive people.
Wonderful.
And it's like we have a natural leaning or a tendency to go to experience emotions, to be empathetic, to be compassionate. But then in doing so, we then are being led by our emotions. So it almost seems that we can't shift ourselves out of that emotionally based mode, following our heart, following our intuition, following our gut feeling, following what we empathetically are tuning into. Are you saying we need to turn that switch off and then just be really, really logical all the time?
So let's try and unpick what you just said there, because you said a lot of things. It was very interesting how you did it, because you flipped from emotions to your beliefs. And this is what people do. So let's start off that deconstruction of what you just said by where we started, sensitivity. I agree with you. A lot of our supporters, a lot of members of our Facebook community, I believe I'm sensitive, and I believe that you are too. But I do not see sensitivity as some kind of a weakness. And we did a video some while back, and I think it's the most pushback we had as on a video, because my teaching, my sharing with you, sensitivity, being ultra sensitive, hypersensitive, whatever you want to call it, I believe being sensitive is your greatest strength. It's not a weakness. Now, do not confuse sensitivity with being led by your emotions, because that's something totally different. Being led or driven by your emotions has very little to do with sensitivity. Sensitivity, I would want to share with you, it means that when you go back to ABC, when you encounter a situation, a person, a stimulus, good or bad, difficult or not difficult, you can approach that with sensitivity, not with your emotions. Sensitivity, if you want it to be, is an important part of your character, of who you are, your truth, your logic, that when somebody brings you a problem, you review, or when you hit a problem at home or work or in your family, you can deal with it in a sensitive way. But that doesn't mean an emotional way. And so what I'm trying to show you is be very careful of the words that you use. You know, I repeat a great Taoist teaching. The words you use are the bricks that build the house that you live in. The words you use is how you look out on the world beyond you. And so mixing up being sensitive to being emotional, they're two totally different things.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? You said dealing with something in a sensitive way as opposed to dealing with it in an emotional way. Two completely different things. Can you just illustrate that a little bit, what you mean by that?
Okay, so let me kind of just invent a situation. So your friend or your partner is coming to you and they're highly stimulated, crying, shouting, maybe aggressive, maybe cutting themselves off. You can deal with that in a very sensitive way. You can give them a hug, give them a kiss, make them a cup of tea. You can say, okay, darling, let's sit down. Let's see if we can talk about this. All of this is totally logical, sensitive way to deal with a very difficult situation. Or you can approach that in an emotional way. You can kind of say, oh, don't bring me that. I get upset as well. I can't deal with it. Oh, I'm overwhelmed. Oh, I can't. Or you could come at it from the opposite side, from the yin and yang of the emotional pendulum and say, oh, pull yourself together. You harsh now. You're not being sensitive to the situation. Oh, don't bring that to me. I can't be bothered. Oh, just go away. Pull yourself together. And you become very judgmental. And so I'm sure I can think of better examples because I wasn't prepared for that. But there's a big difference in dealing with a situation with sensitivity. That means you are sensitive to the situation. You are sensitive to the situation, the person, the stimuli, but you are not emotionally reacting to that situation. You're thinking about it, your logic, the way your approach is sympathetic. The way I approach, I believe, with my clients, say, for instance, I value my directness. Some clients don't particularly like my directness, but I think it's very helpful. I think it's very helpful to work with a client and not to go round and around and around and keep them tied in with session upon session upon session. I think I'm very direct. But I also would like to think I'm very sensitive. So I will challenge them. I will look them right in the eye and I will say, well, what do you believe about that? I don't really want to hear about your feelings. Now, some people would say, but David, not wanting to hear about people's feelings is unsensitive. But I don't believe that. I believe that saying, look, once you tell me you create a feeling, the next thing I want to work with you is what is the belief? What is the thought that creates that feeling? Now, I think that's highly sensitive. I think that's highly helpful to the person. They're paying money. They want to get to the core, to the root of the problem. Talking about their feelings just keeps us going round and around. How does that make you feel? How do you feel about that? Oh, come back next week and we'll talk about your feelings again. We'll go round and around and around. Now, I think being sensitive means let's get to what's creating the emotions so you can then be empowered to make the changes.
I think what you're saying there, David, is you're wanting to give your best to the individual, but in a way that, as you say, that's actually going to help them rather than what they necessarily think they want. But I think I totally get the point you made about you can use your sensitivity to deeply tune into the emotional state, the mindset, the dynamics of a person or an external situation. And wow, that's, to be intuitive, that's really, really fantastic. But you then filter that I guess, that emotional or that intuitive knowledge through your logic, through your beliefs, and thinking, right, how can I constructively really help this person, rather than continuing on the trail of the emotions and being emotionally reactive, being emotionally led, either matching them in their emotions, they feel terrible, I feel terrible now, or pushing against their emotions and reacting, pushing them away, giving them a counter emotional reaction. So it's using the emotional sensitivity as a force for good.
Well, I think that sensitivity comes more from your logic and your belief. I believe, for instance, that creativity comes from your logic and your belief. I believe that if somebody comes with a situation or a problem, you can create and work with them sensitively to create a resolution to that situation. But all of that is coming from a belief system. It's not being inspired by your emotions. Because if you base it on emotions, you are like that kite I've just said. You are just flying around. And when they're angry, you can be angry, or you go the opposite, or you go with them, or you go against them. You're not in any control. And if you base it in your logic, all the things that you said, gut feeling, determination, authenticity, inspiration, this is all coming from that much deeper part of you that I would call logic. And that's where you're closer to your Shen, to your spirituality. I believe very strongly that when you're in your emotions, you are farther away from your spirituality. Let me repeat that. When you're in your belief system, based your logic, your reality, who you are, what you believe, why you believe it, what are your thoughts, what are your principles, what are your morals, I believe you are more connected, much closer to your spirituality. What defines you as a person? What you stand for? What are your morals? What are those principles? Do they apply to you, not only to other people? Alternatively, you can be living in your emotions, not taking responsibility for creating the emotion. The emotion is like you are a victim to the emotion. See how far away now you are to your spirituality because you are in reactive mode. You are reacting to the universe, to life, to people, to situations. You're like, as I say, a pinball machine. That whatever happens, you spin off and we don't know where you're going. We can't pin you down. But this is not spiritual. This is not who you are as a person. And so there is nothing wrong with emotions as long as you are accountable for creating them. That's the difference. Yeah. Not a victim to them. Every emotion you create.
So, David, in terms of authentic, healthy, emotional self-responsibility, would you say in order to practice that, the first principle is fully accepting and embracing that we are the creator of our emotions, we are not the victim of them?
I think that is the most important thing. I try and repeat it on every video. What I normally hear, Alex, with clients who've booked and they've watched several videos and they're interested in the model and they're getting some success from the model, this is what I normally hear. When I ask them that, I normally ask them that as a starting question to see where we're going to start the session. And I say, do you agree? Do you agree that you create your emotions? And they'll normally say, well, yes, but. And then we have that really famous 3-letter word, but. And when you hear the word but about that question, you know the inner child is involved. So what they're saying is, yes, intellectually I accept that, of course, I create my emotions, nothing wrong with emotions, but there's a part of my mind that actually doesn't accept that. There's a part of my mind that cannot accept that, because if that inner child accepts it, then the story that they've been holding on to now suddenly becomes very weak and very vulnerable.
So the story being what?
Poor me, the world's against me, I can't cope, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, I have no worth, I have to be validated, what other people think about me is important, trying to get their own way, trying to manipulate other people or other situations. Once that part of your mind that we call the inner child, and we've done many teachings in the archive on the inner child, it's just a label for a part of your mind. You may want to call it your ego, you may want to call it your emotional mind or your subconscious mind. I believe the label the inner child is much more descriptive and helpful. What the inner child is doing, they're holding on to a story, and they cannot and will not accept that they create emotions. Because once they accept that, then their story falls apart. Because they control you. This is very important. The inner child controls you by creating emotions. You respond to the emotion, and you got to understand that you are creating it because the inner child is you. You are the inner child. It's just a label for part of your mind. So you cannot be responsive. And many of my clients will use the word that you were. Oh, I'm overwhelmed. Oh, I'm too scared. Or I'm frightened. I can't do that because I'm scared. I can't do something new because I'm frightened. Or I'm vulnerable. And so that's how the inner child keeps you trapped into that old, familiar way of thinking.
And the inner child wants to keep us trapped because it places value on the familiar. It distrusts and hates the unknown.
Yes.
And it believes it's not going to be able to cope with the unknown.
Yes.
And it believes it's going to get hurt by other people or other situations because, as you said at the beginning, just because it does not accept that it is creating the emotions. So it's not creating the external difficulties or challenges.
No.
But the emotional response to those difficulties and challenges, it is creating.
Yes. I think, as we've said on many teachings, one of the things you could say about the inner child, one of his mantras would be, better the devil you know. So although the inner child absolutely understands that this isn't successful, absolutely fully understands that you're not reaching your potential, as to be quite honest, you wouldn't be watching videos like ours. This is the paradox that you're in. So the inner child doesn't want to change, but also understands that you're not reaching your potential. And that's why there's a part of your mind watches videos like ours or reads books or tries to get inspiration because you know you are not flourishing. You know that. But there's a part of your mind that's got the brakes on, pulling you back and saying, yes, but that means we've got to do something new. That means we've got to go into the unknown. And that could be worse, couldn't it? So let's stay with what we know. And then it offers all of the justifications and reasons why you shouldn't change. The main one is emotions. I'm fearful. How many times, be honest with yourself, don't tell anybody else. How many times have you seen an opportunity, maybe a change of career, maybe re-educating, maybe moving house, moving town, moving country, finding a new relationship, moving out of an old relationship. And how many times have you known that that would be the best for you? That's very possibly that you would be in your flow and you would flourish, but you don't do it because of an emotion. I'm scared. I'm frightened. The unknown. It could be worse. Let's not step off the cliff because I might fall down and land at the bottom of the canyon. So let's stay with what I've got, even though I know this is not good for me. And that's a great description of one of the facets of the inner child. It will offer you fear, scared, frightened, vulnerable, anxiety, whatever you want to call it. That's why I prefer to call it red lights. It will give you a red light. And what it's saying is, don't go there. Don't go there. We don't know what's going to happen, do we? let's stay with what we know.
Yeah.
And then you say, but this doesn't work, does it? And then he says, yes, but at least we know it. And perhaps if we work harder, perhaps if we do more studying, perhaps if we read more books, perhaps if we watch more videos, perhaps if we do that, we can make what we know work.
Yeah.
And that's what it's trying to do.
Yeah.
Make what it knows work. Or perhaps we can get everybody else to change.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can get everybody else to be fair, to be honest, to be truthful. Perhaps we can get everybody else to agree with us. Then we'll be all right, because we'll have what we know and we will stick with what we know. And that's why it uses the emotion. And that's why it tricks you to say, you are a victim. You are a slave to the emotions. And that's why this teaching we're talking about here is vital, life-changing teaching again. You create your emotions. How can you be a victim of something that only you create? Nobody else transports an emotion into your body. Nobody else, like an arrow, sticks in your heart. Nobody else does that. Every feeling, every experience that you are creating.
And so we've done so many teachings on this, I guess, the inner child work that is required to open up a communication and a dialogue with the inner child, to teach that part, that stuck part of our mind, that we create the emotions. This is within our control. And to do that work, because that is literally the foundational step of emotional self-responsibility. Because if we don't accept that, then we are basically saying, other people, other situations are creating my emotions, and I have no control over it whatsoever. I am just a victim. I am just a slave to my emotions.
And that's why I prefer the label of the inner child, Alex, because it gives you a better impression that this is just a child. It's like one of your physical children wanting their own way, not wanting to go to school, not wanting to go to bed, just sit in front of the television and play a computer game. And it gives you that kind of impression, because when you use a term like subconscious mind, what that gives you is it's something very deep, and it's something that you can't get to, and you're programmed. And really, you're not. I'm not saying the work is not it's easy. It's simple. You can just do it like falling off a log. I'm saying you have to find the right path, the right techniques, the right wording, but it is about you taking control. And the word is accountable. That you are accountable. You are self-sufficient. You are not codependent, because the inner child still wants to be codependent, wants other people to be responsible, as long as they do what they want. And there's the problem. Once you are codependent, of course, as other people have got their own agendas. And then the inner child saying, well, let's change their agenda. That's not fair.
Because if the inner child believes it's not creating the emotions, then it's always looking to other people or other situations to make it feel better.
This is such an interesting question for me. I meditate on this question. And I'm not 100% sure, whether the inner child knows it creates the emotion. I think where I am now, I think the inner child knows it creates the emotion, but does not want to be responsible for it. I think that's where I am. And the way I think is like when a child, say you have a physical child, and the child goes, Mom, it's not fair, it's not, or the child has a sulk, or the child has a tantrum. Are you saying it doesn't know it's having a tantrum? I think it does know it's having a tantrum.
But it's just a means to an end.
It's just a means to an end. And I think that's another reason why I like the metaphor of the inner child. I know it's not perfect. I know it's not perfect. There's no perfection here. But I think it is a good metaphor, because I think your mind, that part of your mind, acts just like a child having a tantrum, having a sulk, just having one. And does it know it's doing it? I think it does, but it doesn't want to be accountable for doing it.
And this is when, as we say, we have to do the inner child reparenting work. We have to become the mature, responsible spiritual parent to our inner child, and put in place some compassionate self-discipline with the child, rather than allowing the inner child and its tantrums and its strategies and its emotional manipulations to completely run our life.
So that's right, Alex. And I first, when I started to do this teaching, I used to say, you have to discipline your child. That was my first kind of teaching. I think that's still correct. But a lot of my clients have had very harsh childhoods with extreme, unfair discipline. So they always found a difficulty in that word. And then I thought, okay, well, let me just try and get to what I'm saying. And then we called it for several years compassionate discipline. So there's a discipline there, but it's in a soft glove of compassion. So you're giving the discipline, but it's compassionate. And then I was working with a client, and they even had difficulty about that because of their childhood environment. And now I think a good way to think about all of this word. So you see what we're doing here. We're trying to find the right word that works for you. Remember what I said at the beginning of the video. The words you use are the bricks that build the house you live in. So it's very important. Please I hope you're inspired by what I'm saying, but find your word. So with this client, he didn't even like compassionate self-discipline. So what we agreed with was a good word for him, and it really helped him. It really moved him on quicker, is consistency. Mm-hmm. He liked that word. The part of the mind that we would call the spiritual parent, the Shen, is consistent with the inner child. It doesn't say one thing and then does something else. It doesn't give in.
It's not flaky. It's not like a flaky parent.
Exactly. So it's just, so again, you see, that's a great example of going from discipline, self-discipline, saying the same thing but a bit softer, more sensitive perhaps, compassionate self-discipline. You might like that. And then thinking about, well, being consistent. But you see, all of those are describing the same energetic that you have to do to yourself. And if you don't like those three, then perhaps think of one yourself and put it below. Write in and share it. Or if you're in our Facebook community, put it in the Facebook community. It'd be a great discussion. What is that word that when you're working with your child and your child throws a tantrum, throws a sulk, creates emotion, what is the word that you use to be able to work with, talk to, harmonize with, balance your inner child? Is it compassionate self-discipline? Is it consistency? Or is it another word that you would like to use?
And so when we put in place the inner child work, we practice the compassionate self-discipline, we practice consistency. And we get to a place where we fully accept that we are responsible for our emotions. We're not responsible for other people's actions or external situations. We have to deal with them, but we're responsible for our emotions. So we've done kind of step one, which is the major step. Mm-hmm. Step two then is we will still experience emotion.
We should experience
It's not like all of a sudden we're neutralized. No. It's good to experience emotions. But then when we experience an emotion, we take a different approach with it, how we deal with it.
Exactly. We're still grounded in our beliefs.
Yeah.
So emotions, so if you suddenly get made redundant, there would be an emotion of a shock. But you would not then quickly look for another job based on the emotion of shock. You would still come back to your belief system. Yeah. So if someone you loved died, you would absolutely experience grief and sorrow and sadness. That's totally normal. But you would not make decisions based on those emotions. You would come back to your grounding of your belief. How do you deal with this? How do you move on? How do you deal with this situation? So instead of responding from the emotion, you're responding from what I would call Shen, that grounding of authenticity, creativity, sensitivity. All of these things are in what you think, what you believe, not what you create. Remember, how can you live from something that you're creating? How can you live from an emotion where there's something else happening inside of your mind that's creating the emotion? You're not getting to the core. A client said to me just the other day, she said, it clicked on me, David, after I was listening back, because when I work one-to-one with clients, I let them record the session so they can go over the session 3, 4, 5, 6, as many times as they want to. I think it gives them good value for money. And I think it also allows them to really dig into what we're saying. And this is what she said to me. She said, the image that came into my mind, how I would describe it, is like a tree. And she said, with all of other counselors I've worked with and all of the other therapists, it's like I've been going from one branch to another branch. So we look at one branch, we deconstruct it, we look at it, and then we go to another branch, and then we go to another branch. And then by that time, the first branch has grown again. We go back to that branch, and we spend our times in the foliage of the tree. And she said, what you've helped me to do is to come down from the branches into the trunk, and then you push me to go from the trunk into the roots. And she said, when you're in the roots, then you can be in control. And I thought that was a great analogy. Again, not perfect, but a great analogy. And so it really kind of tied in with me, because the Taoism, in Taoism, we have a saying, the roots create the fruit. So when you want good fruit, you have to look at the roots and nurture the roots, not the trunk and not the foliage. You have to go to the roots. And so this is the same idea of this. The emotions are the foliage. Your thinking is the trunk. The beliefs are the roots. You have to go down to those roots and look at those roots. Do you want to live by those roots? Are they your roots? For a lot of my clients, their beliefs are not even their beliefs. They're something that they've inherited from their parents, from their grandparents, from the environment, and they've never even looked at them. They've never even examined them to see whether they want to own them, keep them, change them, tweak them. And that's why these roots are so important, because these roots are the fruit that you live your life every day. A lot of my clients, when they're challenging me, say, well, how do I wake up? How can I wake up with anxiety? It's because the roots are affected. And even when you're asleep, the roots are still working. So you wake up with being scared, anxious, overwhelmed. It's because you haven't dealt with the roots. And so you have to go right down into those roots. And that's where you do the work. And that's the life lesson of this video. And it's very important, because if you just think, well, I am just the foliage, then you are a victim. And I do not want you to be a victim. I want you to be empowered. I want you to be in your flow. I want you to flourish. Whatever that is for you, I'm not telling you what that is. That is your responsibility, and I want you accountable for that.
And we've done, again, lots of teachings on this, the concept that if we've accepted that we are responsible for our emotions, it's okay to experience emotions, but if they are then prolonged, if they are profound, if they are overwhelming, that is then a signpost that there is something wrong with the beliefs.
Yes.
And to dig down, as you say, and look at the beliefs, because there's something misaligned, inauthentic, unbalanced, out of harmony in the belief system. There's a misunderstanding there often, which we've created and held on to from our childhood years. And, we've done so many teachings on this concept, and it's the basis of your therapy model, the golden thread process, to work down, to use your analogy, from the branches of the tree, through the trunk, through the thoughts and the mindset, and dig down to look at the roots. Is there something going on which is creating disharmony in the roots? That's where we need to be looking.
I think so, Alex. And I think for everyone, what I found doing this job for 45 years, there is no one set pattern. All we can do is to give you ideas, and then we're encouraging you to come up with your own. That's why I love it when clients come back to me. I thought that was a good analogy that lady said, a good metaphor, to think about it and think about your own. What is it that's driving you? Where are your roots, and what are your roots, and what do they stand for? And if that analogy doesn't work for you, or my ABC doesn't work for you, then think about your own and be accountable and responsible for you and your flow, because you are awesome. And all I want you to do is to believe in you as much as I believe in you. And then you'll experience this wonderful chi energy flowing through you like a healthy tree. The leaves are really healthy, green. The trunk is healthy. There's no disease in the tree. The roots are right down, pulling up the nourishment of the earth that you live in. And you see the teaching of Taoism is very connected to nature and the natural way.
I just want to ask you one final thing, David. And I think for some people, this kind of throws a spanner in the works of the concept of emotional self-responsibility. If we accept that we are fully responsible for our emotions, so, accountability, responsibility being our new mantra, does that mean that we also have to accept we cannot be responsible for other people's emotions?
Yes. As 100%.
But then the comeback on that, David, is, what if I hurt people? Surely I'm responsible for hurting someone.
You can't be. You cannot be responsible for their emotions. And that kind of arches back to what we said. This is where you can use sensitivity. So in this video, which is a long video today, I've said some really harsh things, straightforward things to you, but hopefully I've said them in a sensitive way, and I've given you my explanation. I've given you my point of view. I've allowed you, I've said, if you don't agree or come up with your own point of view, or these are some of the words. So I believe that's showing my sensitivity. I didn't say to you, right, this is what you have to believe. If you don't believe this, then you are stupid. And so the way you deal with other people is in the same sensitive way. So if you're a sensitive person, if you're a creative person, if you're a person working from inspiration, then it's your job to deliver what you believe to be the truth under those kind of circumstances. You sensitively tell people. But we cannot be responsible for the emotions that other people create. We cannot. We are not responsible. You can sensitively help them. You can give them a hug. You can give them a kiss. You can do all that. But you cannot be responsible for what emotion that they create.
Thank you, David. That's very reassuring. And I hope this whole teaching has helped you. As I say, I will put links in the show notes we've done a whole playlist of teachings on the highly sensitive person, as well as more teachings on understanding your emotions and managing your emotions, and teachings on inner child reparenting. So do check out the show notes for those. David works every week with clients all over the world via Zoom video call on exactly these sorts of issues. If you're interested in learning more about David's consultations, I will also pop a link in the show notes about those as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.